Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is Kenneth Kunken. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you start us off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm currently 74 years old, but when I was 20, I had a spinal cord injury during my junior year in college at Cornell University. I played on the lightweight football team, and in 1970, when I made a tackle on a kickoff, I broke my neck and damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. So I'm a quadriplegic, and I've been so for more than 50 years now.
So yeah, I was born in '77, so that was before I was born even. It's
Right.
been a while. So yeah, what let's start off. What is your definition of inclusion?
Well, my definition of inclusion would be giving someone the opportunity to be involved in virtually any activity where other people have the opportunity to be involved in, whether that be in an education setting or in a work setting or a recreation setting. It's basically inclusion to me means having the opportunity to participate in it.
Sure, I love that. I love that definition. Before your ex injury, did what was your experience with disability?
Well, growing up, I had an aunt who had multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
So, I was used to seeing someone in a wheelchair who needed assistance. Um, she died when I was still relatively young. I guess I was 16, I believe, when she died. But I was used to watching my grandmother take care of my aunt. That was my grandmother's daughter. And so that was basically my experience with disability.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I don't ever recall seeing anybody in a wheelchair, the word disability being used. And then my daughter was born. Her name's Cecilia. She's 22. So before she was born, I don't remember any experience with it. So for me, it was all just brand new stuff, having to navigate everything. So sounds like you had a little bit of experience with it.
Right.
Yeah. So have you always been, or after your accident, have you always been included, or what was that like for you?
Well, I had the added misfortune of being injured about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took
Yep.
effect. So getting around in my wheelchair was extremely difficult. Now, I currently use an electric wheelchair,
Yep.
but for years, I couldn't use the electric wheelchair outdoors anywhere. So I was usually in a manual wheelchair and needed to be pushed everywhere.
Right.
But when you talk about my experience with disability and inclusion, I was in the hospital for just under 10 months after my injury. And then I returned to Cornell University to resume my studies. Now, at that time, Cornell was one of the most inaccessible campuses I could have gone to. It's on a very hilly terrain,
Okay.
and most of its buildings had steps in front of them, and there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus.
Hmm.
One of my classes, which met 3 times a week, was located in a building that had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm room was in a building that had 10 steps just to get in. So when you talk about inclusion, I think most people would have said I was excluded
Right.
from going back to Cornell or attending those classes. But with a lot of help from my personal care attendants and fellow classmates, I was able to continue my education at Cornell. But, to think of the term inclusion and
Hmm.
my going back at Cornell, I was certainly the exception when it talks about how inclusive they were back then.
Right. So did you end up moving to like a different dorm room or different classrooms to make it easier, or did you have to get up and down those
No, in
steps
fact,
every
I
day?
had trouble finding a dorm that would be accessible for me.
Okay.
And being that Cornell's on such a hilly terrain, I really wanted to be above most of the hills rather than below it.
Sure.
But what happened with me is during my second semester back at Cornell, we had a fire drill. Now, of course, in a fire drill, everybody has to
Hmm.
evacuate the building. And the next day, one of the school administrators asked me how I managed during the drill. And I was very honest by telling him I was able to get out by having my aide bounce me down the 10 steps. But I
Hmm.
felt bad because I know I slowed up the other students who were exiting. So wouldn't you know, within 2 weeks, they installed a ramp to my dorm.
Okay.
And not only did the students appreciate the fact that there was a ramp there rather than steps, many
Hmm.
preferred using the ramp
Right.
to walking up and down the steps. So it was kind of a win-win for everybody there. Nobody minded the fact that they no longer had to walk up those steps.
Right. So back then, were there any ramps and curb cuts around at all anywhere, or
There
was
were
it
none.
none?
There
Okay,
were none
nothing.
up
Yeah.
at Cornell. Absolutely none. I later moved into New York City, and I convinced the city to put in 2 curb cuts for me because, again, this was well before the
Right.
Americans with
Yep.
Disabilities Act. And I was absolutely thrilled when New York City put in 2 curb cuts for me because you just didn't see many curb cuts around anywhere.
That's interesting. Yeah, my daughter uses an electric wheelchair as well, so we go for walks, and it's frustrating even now, many years after the ADA, that there's still some corners without curb cuts. So I can't even imagine when if there's just nothing anywhere, how much extra work that would be for sure. I guess for me, it's kind of a good reminder. Like some days, I feel like we have so far to go, but we've come a long ways. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was just so difficult to do anything outside
Right.
before um, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And
Right.
I might add, I actually live in Rockville Center, Long Island. And soon after I moved in, I wrote letters to the village asking if they could put in some curb cuts for me.
Hmm.
And again, this was well before the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the village was very helpful, and they ended up putting in 40 curb cuts throughout the
Wow.
village to make it accessible. So it's certainly something that towns and villages could do,
Right.
whether they're mandated to do it now by law
Yep.
or choose to do it to help individuals.
Yeah. Um, why is it important to keep expectations high for yourself and for others?
Well, just to give you my own personal example, when I was first hurt, um, the medical personnel seemed very reluctant to answer any of my questions. But I was finally able to get a brochure that the rehab center published, and I needed somebody to turn the pages for me. But in that brochure, they talked about the type of career I could eventually do with my spinal cord injury. I'm
Hmm.
hurt between the fourth and fifth cervical. And the only career I saw for my level of injury would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Now, just so your listeners know, right before my injury, I was studying engineering at Cornell University, one of the most prestigious engineering schools in the country. Now I injured my neck and not my head, and it seemed the medical personnel thought the best I'd be able to do would be to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Now I was determined to do more than that. And
Hmm.
even though at that time I couldn't even dial a telephone, they were rotary phones back then.
Yep.
I couldn't write or take notes.
Yep.
I was still determined to do more than that. But I saw many of my fellow patients who had spinal cord injuries didn't seem to be doing much with their lives. In fact, many were just staying at home. And I believe part of that was because of the limited expectations the
Right.
medical personnel had for them. I mean, they weren't expected to go out and go back to school or to get a job. And I thought as a result, they basically lived down to those expectations and didn't push themselves to do more. I was fortunate that my family encouraged me to go back to school. And there was a vocational counselor at the rehab center that encouraged me to do so as well. And I went back to Cornell University and got my degree in industrial engineering. Um, but following that degree, I decided that what I really wanted to do was change my career goal and go into a profession where I could help others who were dealing with disabilities or life altering conditions for one reason or another,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or just people who are having face adversity in their lives and face challenges. So I decided to pursue a career in counseling. And I stayed at Cornell and I earned my Master of Arts degree in counseling there. So I became the first quadriplegic to ever earn an undergraduate degree from Cornell, as well as to earn a graduate degree from Cornell. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I went to Columbia University,
Mm-hmm.
where I earned my second graduate degree, a second master's degree, this one in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And I decided to look for a job in the rehabilitation counseling field. And now that I had 2 degrees from Cornell, one from Columbia, 3 prestigious Ivy League degrees,
Yeah.
2 master's degrees, I didn't think I'd have too much difficulty finding a job. Well, to my dismay, no one would hire me. This was
Hmm.
in the mid 70s. I looked for a job for a year and sent out more than 200 resumes. I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services, right? But my family kept high expectations for me and they encouraged me to keep looking. And I was very fortunate that I finally found one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And that was Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center. It's now called the Viscardi Center after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr., and that's located in Albertson, Long Island.
Okay.
And they hired me to work as vocational rehabilitation counselor. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to work and show what I could do. And once I was given that opportunity, I received a number of awards, including the Long Island Rehabilitation Association's Rehabilitant of the Year. And I was soon offered positions from other companies for salaries higher than I was making. But I turned them down and stayed on at the center because I enjoyed what I was doing. And I felt now I was making a difference in the lives of others. And that did an enormous amount for my raising my self-esteem and my self-confidence. And I might say that Viscardi Center has a school for handicapped children all the way through high school. It's got a rehab part of its center to help people with vocational evaluation and training and placement, and it's just a phenomenal organization. And I was so pleased to have the opportunity to work for them. Um, but I might add that after working there for a little over 2 years, I left the center to go to law school because I felt there was still more that I could do. And I went to Hofstra University School of Law and I completed law school in the standard 3 year time period. I did an internship while I was there at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, loved the job, loved the internship,
Mm-hmm.
and applied for a full time position with them when I graduated. And I was really fortunate that the district attorney at the time, Dennis Dillon, based his hiring decision on my abilities rather than my disability. And he hired me to work as an assistant district attorney. So when you think about the medical profession's initial thoughts that maybe I could sell magazine
Right.
subscriptions over the telephone to me becoming an assistant district attorney, a lot of that has to do with keeping your expectations
Right.
high. And not just my expectations, but my family, my friends, everyone's expectations. That helped me a lot.
Yeah. So, what do you think um, in your family's life or their before the accident? What caused them to like set the high expectations with you and not just go along with what the doctor said?
Hmm. My family's been facing challenges from before I was born, I would
Okay.
say. But let me just tell you a little bit more about my early life. My mother died when I was less than 1 month old. It was in 1950 during the polio epidemic, and she caught polio, and it was a severe case, and she died. My brother at the time, who's 2 years older than me, got polio as well, but his was a milder case, confined to one leg. And after 6 months of physical therapy, he recovered. In fact, he became a very good athlete after that. And of course, I mentioned my aunt had multiple sclerosis.
Yep.
So at an early age, my family was used to helping people who needed special attention, right? And who needed that extra care. And I was so fortunate. I mean, I don't wish, medical issues or problems or disabilities on any family, but I was particularly fortunate that my family was able to deal with it. And they helped me in every way possible. And after my injury, they basically assured me that they would act as my arms and legs to make sure I could still do everything I wanted to do.
Yeah. So yeah, in my family, actually my dad had polio when he was younger, and then I think a great aunt had polio, and then another. There's at least three people I think in my pretty close family that had polio. Not just um, more mild cases, I would say probably. My dad had his limp since then, but besides that, he was okay with it. So that's yeah, had to be about the same time too, probably around 1950.
1950.
Yeah, right around the same time, probably. Yep. Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense because it's interesting. Like yeah, like you're saying, the expectations for even kids. Adults now. My daughter's age, where depending on how the family their expectations are, or if you go along with what the doctors are telling you or not, how much of a difference it makes. It's very because yeah, the expectation is a huge thing for sure. What? Why did you write a book about your life?
Well, there are a number of reasons. I mean, I actually started writing a book about my life soon after I was hurt. A
Okay.
friend of my aunt's by the name of Albert Meglin came to the rehab center that I was at, and he suggested I write a book, one to help me deal with the depression I was in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was severely depressed after my injury. He thought by talking about it, it may help me deal with my depression. But in addition, he thought it could be very informative to other individuals to tell them, one, what it's like to have a spinal cord injury and what it's like to go through rehabilitation and what's being done. So he initially helped me get started on the book. And then I went back to school and I stopped and I start again on vacations and stop. And then I even tried to type a little bit myself with a certain brace and splint. I was able to type a little bit like with the erase of a pencil, like typing with one finger.
Yep.
And I did that a little bit for a while and I'd stop. And then eventually, just to jump ahead, um, I got married in 2003 to my wonderful wife, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about keeping expectations high. Well, Anna told me after we got married, she wanted to have my baby. Talk about high expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the time, I'd been paralyzed for more than 30 years
Right.
and I was already in my 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But, with Anna's encouragement, we looked into various options. We
Mm-hmm.
decided it still may be possible through in vitro fertilization for
Mm-hmm.
me to father a child. So we pursued it. And on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room when my wife, Anna, gave birth to triplets.
Wow.
We have three incredible boys, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. They are
Mm-hmm.
now sophomores at three different colleges
Sure.
in upstate New York. And when my boys were born, and I initially they're perfectly healthy, but initially triplets are all born prematurely. They were all in the neonatal intensive care unit. And when I visited them in the NICU and I looked at them, I said, "Whoa, this is a story that needs to be told."
Right.
I was convinced finally, because people had encouraged me to write a book well before that.
Yep.
And even though I had started one, I had stopped. I was convinced that maybe this could help other people,
Mm-hmm.
motivate and inspire them to do more with their lives. So, with my wife's help, we spent a lot of time sitting down by her laptop computer and we
Mm-hmm.
wrote this book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story.
Yeah, that's great. What's it? What does it be like to be a father to triplets?
It's incredible. It's the
Yeah.
greatest thing in the world. And the only thing that I could possibly imagine could be better than that would be if we had quadruplets. I mean, it is just the greatest thing. I have three wonderful sons,
Hmm.
Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. It was been marvelous to watch them grow and develop and to be a father and give guidance and help them when I could. And later they helped me. They sometimes would feed me or give me a drink or turn on a light or whatever it is I need. But it's absolutely great to see how they've developed into three fine young men. They're very close with each other. They're best friends. They're doing absolutely great. And I love the fact that I'm now a husband and a father and enjoying a wonderful personal life,
Yeah.
in addition to the fact that I had a very successful career.
Yeah. When you guys started looking into having kids, did you? I mean, were the doctors? I mean, did you get any weird stares or doctors say any things surprising to you when you started down that
Actually,
path?
no.
No. Okay.
What happened was we were involved with an organization called the Miami Project,
Okay.
who at that time, again, this was over 20 years ago, had started a fertility clinic to help people with spinal cord injuries try and
Oh.
have children.
Okay.
And we got in touch with them, and they recommended a doctor here on Long Island by the name of Dr. Bruce Gilbert, who, when we met with him, was very encouraging about the chances of me becoming a father. And through his encouragement and help, we pursued it. And, when my wife, Anna, was going through her part of the in vitro, she met a lot of women at the fertility clinics who, went through these procedures numerous times and didn't get pregnant.
Okay.
Well, we were certainly lucky that Anna got pregnant the first time
Hmm.
that they did the implantation, and we were triply blessed with three
Yeah,
incredible, beautiful boys.
that's great. So yeah, I have two kids. They're 15 months apart, so not. I mean, that's pretty close. So I mean, nothing like triplets, but I mean, and we had them in two in diapers, still kind of at the same time. Not so yeah, not that many diapers, but yeah, it was nice to have them close together to get it over with, and then they're pretty good friends. They're really good friends and close. So yeah, that's great. Um, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my sons, the way they've developed, the way they've matured, the way they're caring and have great character. They try and help others whenever they have the opportunity. They help each other, they're best friends.
Hmm.
And while it's difficult to every day give each one of them the attention they need, they've never been jealous of each other. They understand what it means to be patient and what it is to help other people. And we brought them to the Viscardi Center, where I was originally a rehab counselor.
Yeah,
And they got to meet many other people who had physical disabilities. And they're so comfortable around people with
right.
disabilities and try to help people whenever they can. That's what I'm most proud of, is the way they've developed into such fine, caring, good character young men.
Yeah, that's great. What motivates you to be the best you can be?
My kids and my wife and my brother and sister and aunts, uncles and cousins, and everybody that's helped me so much over the years. All of the things that I did, I never would have been able to do without a lot of help. And I was fortunate that everybody devoted their time and efforts to helping me to be the best I could be. And through their help, there's I could never pay them back enough other than try to be the best I could be and to help others.
Yeah. Have you always been able to have enough, people to help do your cares and stuff, or you have trouble finding people to help you out?
When I was looking for personal care attendants, that was always difficult. In fact, that was one of the biggest problems I had.
Right.
But I was very fortunate that my wife, Anna, who actually had been one of my aides at the time, Anna started working for me as my weekend attendant.
Okay.
And obviously, over time, our relationship grew stronger.
Hmm.
and we got married in 2003. And since we've been married, my wife is responsible for my total care. She takes care of me. And keep in mind, when our babies were little, she was taking care of me as well as the three boys and raising them.
Wow.
And she's a superwoman and incredible to be caring for three babies, three young boys, and me at the same time, and taking care of the household and the shopping and the cooking and the errands and everything else that needs to be done. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been for my daughter too. She needs help with all the daily living tasks, so that's been a big thing. Just trying to, it's been her mom and me kind of doing a lot of it. Have trouble finding people and keeping them. So yeah, it's been a lot of us doing it her whole life. So I mean that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest problems. And over the years, I had many, many, many different aides, and it was difficult finding, training them, keeping good aides, and knowing that it was a constant issue and a constant problem to do that.
What do you like to do for fun?
Well, for fun, obviously, I love watching my boys and
Yep.
seeing what they're doing. I mean, they all are into the martial arts.
Okay.
They're all three of them are second-degree black belts in Taekwondo, and they've also studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I
Okay.
watch them go for their belt tests
Sure.
and competitions. But in addition, even though I got hurt playing football, I broke my neck playing football.
Yeah.
I still watch football virtually every Sunday.
Okay.
I live and die with the New York Jets.
There you go.
And but I watch movies, go to movies,
Hmm.
spend a lot of time with family and friends, and just try and get out whenever I can.
So you guys, oh, wait, we were talking. You were talking a little bit. Are you guys going to Montana or something, or planning to
Well,
go?
my brother's youngest son, he's got two boys,
Okay.
is getting married in Montana.
Oh, okay.
In Montana, that's where his fiance is living.
Sure.
He's getting married in Montana in the end of May.
Yep.
So we're talking about driving out
Road
there.
trip. Yeah.
And when you think of what a long trip it is, for on my honeymoon, we drove across country and back.
Okay.
So we've done this before.
You've done it before, yeah.
Right. So that's what we're planning on doing.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. I'm trying to think. I've not been to Montana, so that's I've been to Colorado a couple of times, but I've not been to Montana, so that should be fun. Let's see. So, what do you think are like the biggest challenges for people with disabilities now, like compared to like when you had your injury?
Well, fortunately, accessibility has gotten a lot better, but is not perfect.
Right.
There's still a lot of facilities that are not wheelchair accessible or accessible for people that have other types of disabilities, whether it be having braille, different places, or facilities to help with people that have hearing impairments. So, or people just who are visually impaired and have difficulty getting around, a
Hmm.
city street. So there's still work that needs to be done. But in addition, employment.
Right.
Finding employment for people with disabilities is still an issue. And while it's improved a great deal from when I first looked for a job,
Right.
it's still got a ways to go. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, at the Viscardi Center, I'm now on their board of directors.
Okay.
And we work very hard in trying to not only place individuals with disabilities,
Hmm.
but encourage other employers to hire people with disabilities, as well as encourage people with disabilities to start their own businesses.
Yes.
So, finding employment for people with disabilities is still a challenge. It's gotten better, but still has a long way to go. And
Right.
changing people's attitudes towards people with disabilities has gotten better now that they've more and more come in contact with somebody with a disability.
Yes.
But it still has a ways to go. And I'm proud to say we're making very good progress, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. So how do you think, in both of those areas, the employment and the other one, how do you think what can we do to like make it better?
Well, one, be more open to hiring people with
Right.
disabilities. I mean, I was fortunate that when I was looking for a job as a assistant district attorney, my district attorney that I applied for a job with was a very forward thinking, progressive, self confident employer who, as I said, based his hiring decision on my abilities rather than my disability. Too many people look for the limitations that somebody has,
Right.
and they can't get by that instead of looking at the abilities that they have. And one of the messages that I would like to convey is just because something has not been done before doesn't mean you cannot do it now. Now, when I was applying for a job as an assistant district attorney, I didn't know of another trial attorney who was a quadriplegic. And I certainly didn't know of another assistant district attorney who was a quadriplegic. But I was fortunate that my district attorney gave me the opportunity to show what I could do. And as a result, I worked there for more than 40 years. And in fact, I was promoted a number of times in that job. And I eventually became one of the deputy bureau chiefs, where I was supervising more than 25 other assistant district attorneys. And a lot of it has to do with the attitude of the employer to look past the disability and focus on somebody's abilities.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because for me, the inclusion piece, my daughter was sent to a segregated classroom right away. We didn't know about inclusion. Once we learned about inclusion, we tried to get her back in the general ed classes, but like you're saying, it depends a lot on the like in the school's case, like the administrators, what their view on inclusion is or disability is. Because if they're not on board with inclusion, it's so much harder to you know for instance, get my daughter included. So that makes, yeah, for the employment piece as well. If employers, the people hiring are not, pro disability or willing to, have people with disabilities work there, it makes it much more difficult for sure.
Aaron, if I could just address that.
Yeah.
At the district attorney's office, when we leave the position, we go through what's called an exit interview.
Okay.
And during the exit interview, the person in personnel wants to know what you like best about the job and what parts you thought could be improved.
Sure.
And on a number of occasions, I was told that the assistant district attorneys who were leaving said that the best part of their job, or at least one of the best parts, was meeting, getting to know, and working with me. Now,
Okay.
I'm not saying that to boast or brag.
Yep.
I know they were not saying about meeting Ken Kunken. They were talking about meeting, getting to know, and working with someone who had a significant disability.
Right.
Because unless they had a close family member with a disability, most people don't come in daily contact
Yes.
with somebody with a disability.
Right.
And I think they seemed surprised to see that for the most part, I had a positive attitude and a pleasant disposition. But most importantly to them, that working with me did not mean any additional work for them.
Right.
They saw that I was a hard worker, dedicated, loyal to my job, and quite frankly, most of the time, I was actually more productive than many of my fellow ADAs. That's one of the reasons why I was promoted a number of times. And I think the more people are exposed on a daily basis
Right.
with others who have disabilities, they lose their fear, they lose their concern about what additional work it may mean for them if they're working alongside with somebody with a disability. And they realize we're just like them in just about every other way, other than some possible physical, mental, or emotional limitations.
Yeah. What is one tip you can share to help our listeners be more inclusive today? Just something simple we can all do to be more inclusive.
Well, to be more inclusive, I think you've got to look past the disability and not only focus on somebody's ability, but keep your expectations high. It's the limitations that you subconsciously place on others that sometimes limit those other people because a person's performance often rises or falls based upon what others expect of him or her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you keep your expectations high, for yourself, certainly, but for others as well, you'll be pleasantly surprised how well people can do and how they rise to the occasion. And it's just giving everybody that opportunity. When you ask me about what inclusion means to me, it means being given the opportunity to show what you can do and then be treated accordingly.
Yeah. I love that. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
Well, one, I think it's important to keep hope up. And I don't look about unrealistic expectations, but I talk about there's an awful lot people can do, right? If given a chance. And sometimes it's darkest before the dawn, and sometimes it's tough
Yeah.
to see the light at the end of a tunnel. But it's so important to keep your spirits up and your hopes up and know that people around you are basically good people. Sometimes they don't know exactly what to say, what to do, or how to act, but they really want to help if they're given the opportunity. And when you have the opportunity to help others, do everything you possibly can to take advantage of that opportunity to help others. I mean, years from now, you should be able to say that you did everything you possibly could to not only make your life better, but the lives of those around you better as well.
Yeah. That's all great. Are you ready for the final question?
Sure.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
I don't think I've ever had it. And the reason why I say I don't think is before my injury, when I was graduating high school, I
Right.
actually camped out one weekend for a few days out in Southampton, Long Island.
Yep.
And we were cooking on the beach ourselves. And I think we may have cooked spam during one of those meals because I remember cooking something that I thought was unusual at the time. Uh, but I might add that while I love eating meat or something close to meat, I'm married to a woman who's a vegetarian.
Yeah, I asked that question of all my guests because I live in Austin, Minnesota, where Hormel is and where they make spam. And if you ever want to visit the spam museum, you have to come here because that's where the spam museum is
Oh,
located.
it's good to know. Mm.
Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
Thank you. Well, I have a website. It's
Sure.
my name, KenKunken.com. And on that website, not only can they learn more about me and my life, but they could learn how to purchase my book. I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story. And if I might just have a minute to tell you where I
Sure.
got the name of my book.
Yep.
While I was still in the rehab center, I was asked to testify before a United States Senate Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy. And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And that inscription has always been very meaningful to me. The inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." And that's why I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story.
That's a good story for how you named it.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about my life and to share some thoughts with you.
Yeah. To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.